Hey guys, Zomfox here, and we are officially less than 100 days until the 2025 United Football League season kicks off. And now is as good a time as any to look at every single UFL team's current quarterback room. Now, some of these teams are pretty much already set for the upcoming season, some other ones need a big starter return, and a couple others, they need a lot. So if you want to just go to a specific team or two, there will be timestamps in the description below. But without further ado, let's get started with the defending champions in the Birmingham Stallions. As it stands, the Stallions are the only team in the league that only has one quarterback on their roster. Let's get this very clear out of the way, right? Each team needs three quarterbacks. Because of how the system works with the emerging QB and all that, you need three quarterbacks on your roster at minimum, and the Stallions only have one. Now, Jamar Smith has been with the team since 2022 when the Spring Football League's ultra-modern era kicked off with the 2022 USFL, and in that season, he was very, very good. He was at an MVP level until about midway point in the season, but he was still good enough to be the reason the team got to the championship game and won it, even though Magoo did come in and play really great in that second half. But in 2023, he was the actual starter. He wasn't the starter in 2022, that was Magoo, and then he came in after Magoo's injury and just played so well to be the starter. In 2023, however, it was a bit different. So he came in as the starter and then almost immediately got hurt. He broke his finger and hasn't played since. He did not play at all this past season with the UFL version of the Birmingham Stallions, and he hasn't played since that game in Week 1 for the Stallions in 2023. A lot of people have concerns about exactly how fit he is to play after that injury, but the fact is that this is somebody who still has a lot of spring football experience, but if he's the only quarterback you're bringing, of course there's going to be a problem when you need other guys. Now, the one thing the Stallions do have, and this is something I'm not really going to do a ton of with the other teams, but the Stallions have a lot of guys they could bring back. Technically speaking, there is a possibility that any of these three guys could return. As of now, the most likely would be Matt Corral. He is a free agent. The other two are not. But Magoo has been getting cut, then re-signed, released, re-signed with the Packers practice squad with injuries and other stuff, being wide receiver and all that. Martinez is still on the Jets and their whole practice squad thing. But both of those guys, it is possible that one of them might get released and not picked up, and then the Stallions could swoop in and get him. Magoo had what many would say is the greatest spring football season in the ultra-modern era, with just that insane 2023 season he had. Then Adrian Martinez was, of course, the league MVP last year, but Matt Corral returning would be a solid one. Right, the last time we saw him in spring football, we saw him in that playoff game against the Michigan Panthers, where he came in relief of Martinez after Martinez wasn't playing too hot, and eventually did lead them to beating the Panthers in that game. Now, he wouldn't get the start in the championship game. Martinez would and would win championship game MVP in that. But Corral is still one of the best quarterbacks the league had last year. So if he ends up returning, it would be huge for the team. Of course, Sam Hartman's another, possible one, the guy they drafted. So the Stallions do have a lot of options, but right now they need the most help overall because of the fact that they're kind of having to rely on some of these guys getting released and needing a place to go in the Stallions. Maybe they'll make a big free agent signing because we saw a couple of them. We'll see. Now, the second team is going to be the Michigan Panthers. The Michigan Panthers are one of two teams that, well, the other one we'll get to later, but one of two teams that is essentially going to be bringing back the exact same quarterback room they had last year to this year. As of now, Brian Lewerke has not re-signed. I don't fully expect him to, just because it's pretty obvious these three guys are better than him. Now, the projected QB room, I would say personally, is probably Perkins number 1, Etling 2, Perry 3. I know a lot of people would be kind of shocked at putting Etling above Perry. The fact is that once you eliminate that, admittedly terrible playoff game he had against the Stallions, which mainly was a terrible third quarter, for being completely honest, against them, I think that overall Etling is just somebody I would rather have than Perry. I understand Perry's a pretty deep threat overall rushing-wise. Rushing yards per game he was better than Perry, Etling, and Etling obviously played less games and had somewhat similar stats. It's just when I watched them play, I felt like Etling was just a somewhat more reliable QB, despite the fact that Perry, statistically was better. The point is, though, is Perkins should be the starter, right? Look, I'm not going to fight you if you think EJ should be the backup, but Perkins, in the limited time he played last year, showed he could be an elite quarterback in this league. The only reason he didn't play in the playoff game is because he got hurt, right? He ended up playing a couple of games when both Etling and Perry were injured, and they did the Lewerke Perkins deal, and Perkins was the far better of the two quarterbacks, and when you look at what he did, it's crazy. He really didn't play all that much, yet he finished with more rushing yards than either Perry or Etling, and then when you look at passing-wise, he wasn't bad there either. Now, yes, he had the one COC Mariner play, which should have been an interception, but wasn't. But overall, he was a very, very solid quarterback. The fact is, he was basically what the Battlehawks were hoping Manny Wilkins would be, which is very much a dual threat QB, except he actually was. Perkins looked incredible in the limited time he played, and I think most Panthers fans would agree that we want to see him as the starter in this upcoming season, or at least the backup. I think he has earned that from what he did. Again, statistically finished with 4 touchdowns to 1 interception, and he didn't even fumble the ball. Granted, he didn't play a ton, but he never fumbled the ball. And passing-wise, he was a very accurate passer. He had an almost 80 completion percentage. So when you look at him, he was a very, very good player on both running and passing. And I think that overall he is the best quarterback this room has. I would personally put Etling as the backup and then Perry at third string, though I'm not going to fight you if you think that Perry should be the backup over Etling. I just don't see that, but Perkins should be the starter. Overall, this is a very solid quarterback room. Again, this is the quarterback room that led the team to the playoffs last year, and if it wasn't for that disastrous third quarter, would have been in the championship game. So that's the Panthers. Now, the Memphis Showboats currently is just Quentin Dormady and Troy Williams. A lot of people are expecting Josh Love to re-sign, but, who knows? And then, of course, Case Cookis is also a possibility. As of now, this is a very hit-or-miss quarterback room. Troy Williams last year was not all that great. Now, he did only fumble the ball once, but interception-wise, you have 2 of the 3 most turnover-prone passers in the entire league. All right, Dormady threw 6 interceptions, and T. Will threw 5. Neither of these guys even played the full year, right? Jordan Teamu led the league in interceptions, but he did play all 10 games. Neither of these 2 guys played all 10 games, right? Dormady was a on and off again starter due to injuries with Garbers, and even getting benched in that Houston game for Kevin Hogan. Then T. Will had that real off and on again starts, don't start, come in, don't come in with Case Cookis, and then eventually they went to Love. So the fact is you have 2 very turnover-prone quarterbacks, and even rushing-wise, T. Will didn't do as much as we expected him to this past season, which, again, how much was that terrible O-line? Probably a lot of it. But the point is that the trade to get Dormady, I talked about it when it initially happened, I think was a very bad trade. Jordan Ferguson was, once you get rid of the receivers and tight ends that the Showboats had, was arguably their best player on their team last year, and kicker. He was arguably the best player last year. He had 5 sacks, 7 TFLs, which were both very high on the UFL rankings. And you got a quarterback that, if we're going to be honest, isn't really going to start in like any other UFL team. I mean, as of now, maybe in Birmingham, but even then, I don't know. It's just that overall, when you look at it, it was a very poor trade. So it's kind of one of those things we have to hope that Wisenhunt knows what he's doing when he's getting Dormady to be that quarterback. Because Dormady is one of those guys who, very much like Josh Love, will basically come in and give you like a good game or a good half, and then will taper off and then eventually give you one more good performance. That's kind of what he was. That's what he was with the Guardians in 2023. He had those couple insane games, and the rest, yeah. And then this past year, he came in that first game, had a really great half, then never really again. He looked better than Garbers in the championship game, but that was only because Garbers basically didn't try. Because let's be completely honest, Garbers was a better quarterback than him last year. The only reason people don't want Garbers back is for a very justifiable reason, and that's because he clearly didn't give it his all in the championship game. I know there's reports he had an NFL deal, which ended up backfiring on him because of everything that happened. But the fact is, Dormady wasn't even the best quarterback on his team last year. It's just, the Showboats quarterback room needs some help, because it's hard to look at Dormady being the projected starter since he's the one that was traded for. Because in all honesty, I think T. Will is a better quarterback. I think that T. Will just, again, like Cookis, got stuck behind a terrible O-line. We've seen what he can do with the Maulers in 2023. Whereas Dormady, I don't look at his time in the Guardians as being better than T. Will's. So, Showboats, they really need a better O-line to make sure this works or doesn't. But as of now, they definitely need a bit of help. Now, the Houston Roughnecks' current quarterback room is also pretty much set. They've got 3 guys. Projected would be Nolan Henderson as the starter, Jalen McClendon as the backup, Davius Richards as the third string. Now, McClendon was also a traded for quarterback. They traded Keandre Thomas for him, who is a very solid player, but not to the same level of a Jordan Ferguson, in my opinion. But when you look at it overall, though, Henderson probably did do enough to earn the starting job. Now, why is that? Well, passing-wise, he wasn't the most accurate passer. I mean, he was sub 60%. But he also was a very solid rusher in 2024 this past season, and overall looked clearly the best of the 3 quarterbacks. He looked much better than Sinet and way better than Garantano. So overall, I think that he has earned the starting job. Now, McClendon will be the backup. The defenders really screwed him over. I talked about it a lot during the season last year. They should have benched Te'amu probably at about week 8 or at least week 9 when the playoffs were essentially out of it to see what they had in McClendon. Never really did, so McClendon really didn't get any time last year. In 2023 with the Vegas Vipers, that god-awful roster, he managed to look like a very solid quarterback. He is basically what Guardians fans said Dormade was in a lot of ways, which is, playing great despite what's around him. He really did that because that Vipers team was not good. I mean, we all remember how bad Perez looked, and then when he went to the Renegades, how much better he looked. So the fact is McClendon, I think, could be the starter here. It's just I think that they're going to initially give it to Henderson. Henderson knows the playbook, was already here last year, obviously. And then Davius Richard is one of those guys who is kind of a wild card, right? Very much sort of similar to Lindsey Scott. This is a guy who was at an HBCU, was insanely good there, got injured right before the draft and all that kind of stuff, and then never got a shot in the NFL. So it's a question of exactly what he could do. I wouldn't be shocked to end up seeing him get some time or maybe even jump somebody for a spot on the roster. Because again, these are just projected QB rooms. I mean, we're not even at training camp yet. But he's definitely a wild card. It'll be interesting to see what ends up happening, but that's the Roughnecks. Now onto the XFL side, we're going to start off with the Renegades, who, as I alluded to, are that second team that is going to bring back the same QB room. The only reason why it's not guaranteed is because currently Perez hasn't re-signed, though, I mean, look, everybody pretty much knows that of those big 4 quarterbacks in spring football, and by that I mean the guys who've been here for a while, Case Cookis, Te'amu, McCarron, and Perez. Perez is the most likely to come back this upcoming season, and he is most likely to come back to the Renegades. He's been with all their offseason stuff. Everybody kind of expects it. Then would be McCarron, then the other two. But Perez probably will come back, which if he does, he's obviously going to be the starter. But right now, I would project that Lindsey Scott gets the starter and Holton Ahlers gets the backup. Now, Holton, of course, was dominant at ECU statistically. I mean, he wasn't winning, a ton of games at ECU, but he put up a ton of passing yards. He has basically every single Pirates record and even has or did have a bunch of AAC records. But overall, Lindsey Scott, I would say, is the starter. He also had an insane year at Incarnate Ward that last year in college. And when you look at what he did last year, he didn't actually get a shot. He just kind of came in for gadget plays and stuff like that. But he showed a lot of potential in the limited time he did play. He did fumble twice, which isn't great. He never threw an interception in his 7 passing attempts. But I feel like when you look at him, he is somebody that has a very high ceiling in this league. And so if these were the 2 guys that I'm having to pick a starter from, I would pick Lindsey Scott to be the starter. I think that his potential is really high in this league. Again, similar to a Bryce Perkins. Somebody who could be a very accurate passer while also being a great rusher. You need to see him actually throw more than obviously 8 or 7 total times. But I think that this is somebody who could be a very good player in this level, which is why I would start him over Holton. But again, Perez probably returns. If he does, obviously Perez is the starter. He was insane last year. Some people still think he should have won MVP. So that's the Renegades. Now the Battlehawks. Man, I'm glad I didn't make this video 2 days ago, because if I did, I wouldn't have seen this. Because they signed all 3 of these guys like that. I mean, this was just out of nowhere. Backed it as, something is brewing, and then 3 quarterbacks get signed. Now, one of them was a re-sign in Manny Wilkins, who started a couple games last year and very inaccurate. Manny Wilkins is somebody who I can see why you bring him back and you even could start him. His potential, again, like other guys, is very high. But like I said earlier, Perkins is like a better Manny Wilkins, right? Manny was great running the ball. Now, passing-wise, yes, a couple of his interceptions were very late in the game when it was not... Well, one of them was when it was pretty much over, but he still had to throw him. The point is, though, is that he was very inaccurate. We're talking insanely inaccurate. That 54 completion percentage does a little justice. He wasn't accurate. But if he can get his accuracy better, he can be a very, very scary quarterback at this level, which is why I would project him as the backup. Now, Chavin Cordero was a drafted quarterback. He is currently the only quarterback that was drafted by a team to be signed to the team, right? We've seen a few other guys get drafted, haven't signed. He was. Now, he didn't play at, big schools. He played at Hawaii and San Jose State. So this isn't somebody who was, dominating at the top of the level in college football. And even then, it wasn't like he was putting up stats that lit the world on fire. But he was a very solid quarterback nonetheless. He was drafted. That's, he is here. I project him as the 3rd string. I think when you're talking about ceiling, Manny has a higher ceiling. But I think starter, it's got to be Max Duggan. Now, look, Max Duggan is somebody who a lot of people like to meme about because of the fact that he did admittedly get absolutely annihilated in that national championship game against Georgia with TCU. But as everybody likes to forget, they still had to make it to that game. So, you got to give them credit. They didn't make it there. Granted, they got absolutely annihilated. The final score was like 65-7 or something like that. But Max Duggan was great that year. He won a bunch of awards, Davey O'Brien, Johnny Unitas, a few other awards. Was a Big 12 quarterback, was just really, really dominant. He went 12-2 that year overall, threw for like 3,700 yards. And again, his stats weren't, the most daunting we've seen in college football, but he was a very solid quarterback and is a dual threat. Now, the biggest concern a lot of Battlehawks fans would have is that he essentially lost the QB3 spot to Luis Perez with the Chargers this preseason. He was drafted by the Chargers, was always the third string, and then lost the battle to Perez. So, a lot of Battlehawks fans see that and are very scared about that. And of course, the biggest one is he has to replace A.J. McCarron. Beck got rid of A.J. You can view why, however reason. I view it that he's kind of throwing some blame on him. The point is, Max has to be better than McCarron. He can't be as good. If he's as good, it's a bad move because McCarron was popular. So Duggan has to be better than McCarron, which it's kind of hard to see that, right? McCarron is a guy who pretty much has almost always been able to have some sort of backup third-string job in the NFL, whereas Max Duggan, obviously, not really. So there's a lot of question marks about that, but I still think Duggan would be the starter. He is a big signing. He is one of the biggest QB signings the league's had in the past couple of years because of the fact that this is somebody who just got to a national championship a couple of years ago. Again, a lot of question marks. Battlehawks fans are overall, at least from what I'm seeing, definitely not super stoked because of the fact that this is essentially replacing McCarron. It'll be interesting to see. This is definitely one of the more this is very much a hit or miss sort of QB room. You don't really know a ton what you have with these guys. So, could be really good, could be really bad. We'll see in a couple months. Now, the second to last team is going to be the San Antonio Brahmas, who currently only have two quarterbacks, and that's Kellen Mond and Kevin Hogan. Let's get this out of the way. Garbers is more than likely not getting re-signed. Again, Garbers was a top 5 quarterback last year. I know some people, when I put him at 5th, were very like, no, he wasn't. Yes, he was. His championship game performance was abysmal. He didn't try. But regular season, he was an MVP candidate for a reason. He was a very efficient passer, if not like the most, aerial kind of guy. He was a efficient passer. He ain't getting back, okay? That championship game performance, those slides he took when he should have dove or should have kept running, yeah, that's keeping him out of football entirely. And they got rid of Dormade by trading him. So, who's their QB3 going to be? Nobody knows. As it stands, it's Kellen Mond and Kevin Hogan. Now, Kellen Mond was a third-round pick, basically never got a real opportunity with the Vikings, went to the Browns, also never got an opportunity, so you pretty much have to look at what he did in college, which, again, this was years ago. But in college, he's a very, very efficient player. Again, we're talking his last year, 19-3 TD interception ratio, 60 completion percentage, guy twice, solid rusher, not, lighting the world on fire, but somebody who could get you 500 yards in a season. Very solid. And then Kevin Hogan, not really a ton to talk about. He came in that one game where they benched Dormade against the Roughnecks, and he ended up being a huge reason why the team ended up winning the game. Again, some of it was that ground game, especially in the last drive, but he still did get him that first one that got him in it. So, again, this is another one of those very questionable quarterback rooms. Kellen Mond is that hometown kid coming back, which is a great story. But again, he hasn't really had an opportunity to truly play in the pro level. And then Kevin Hogan only played that one game where he came in at the end of it. So, exactly how it's going to be, again, it's a big question. There's still time to sign another quarterback. Of course, A.J. McCarron is a big one. McCarron, more than likely, is going to come to this team, the Defenders, or the Stallions. He says he wants to return. If he is, it's going to be one of those 3 teams. I don't see him going to the Renegades. I just don't. So, it's going to be one of those 3 teams. Stallions, the homecoming, or it's going to be the other teams to play the Battlehawks twice, which is what he wants. I wouldn't be too shocked if it comes to the Brahmas. It would be a hilarious move. They were rivals last year, and he just goes to the Brahmas to go against the Battlehawks. It would be hilarious. Granted, so would the Defenders, but they need another quarterback, at least another backup, because, again, Kevin Hogan looked okay in the little bit he played. It's just he only played a little bit, and Kellen Mond hasn't played at pro level. So, that's the Brahmas. And the last team is going to be the DC Defenders. DC Defenders, if you don't count the Stallions since they only have one quarterback, I think everybody would agree that this is the weakest quarterback room currently, and that's Emory Jones and Mike DeLillo. Now, as a Bearcats fan, I've talked about it before, I'm a Bearcats fan. Emory Jones, I preferred watching him over Ben Bryant, but Ben Bryant at least won games, okay? Emory Jones went to Cincinnati. They had like a decent start, and then it just went downhill. Now, again, I did prefer watching him over Ben Bryant, but like I said, Bryant was winning games for him. And this past season, Brendan Sorsby was winning more games. Granted, they completely choked the second half of the season, but he also looked better than Emory Jones. A lot of people are not super stoked on Jones for the Defenders. Again, this is a bigger name coming to the league. Again, this is somebody who was playing at higher schools, Florida, ASU, and then Cincinnati. But when you look at it, right, since leaving ASU is better now. Again, it took them another couple of years, but this past season, I mean, right now they're in the playoffs. The Bearcats, again, they choked the second half season, but when Jones left, they got better. So that's not good. He didn't wow anybody in the preseason, but he is projected to be the starter because Mike was a FCS player, right? That subdivision level of college football, where even then he wasn't lighting up the world. He was very solid. That last year especially, I mean, 67 completion percentage for 3K yards, 28 to 10 TD interception is very solid, but that's not lighting the world on fire. That's not Lindsey Scott and Incarnate Ward level of crazy. So they kind of need a quarterback to return. Now, of course, the question marks are just who, because Te'amu is the one a lot of people would expect, but even then, Te'amu Wright wasn't that great last year. How much of that was the team around him? Debatable. Then, of course, do you get DeAndre Francois? Maybe. It's a lot of question marks. This team definitely needs another quarterback that's a big name. Because, again, as it stands, this is probably the weakest quarterback room on paper, not counting the Stallions, who only have one quarterback. As well as, yes, there's other ones that, like Dormade might not be the most proven guy in a sense of he's going to get you to a championship as your starter. But he can give you a couple good games, and you've seen T. Will lead a team to a championship game in this level. Emory Jones, you haven't. So, the Defenders, they need another quarterback. But again, if Abram Smith comes back even 70% of what he was in 2023, really doesn't matter who the quarterback is as long as they're not terrible. So, we'll have to wait and see on that. But overall, that'll do it. This has been ZombFox. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. We're getting closer and closer to the 2025 UFL season kicking off, and we're closer and closer to 1,000 subscribers on the channel, where we are doing a giveaway. We're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers before the 2025 season kicks off. And if you've been a fan of the channel for a while, think about becoming a community member for as low as 99 cents a month. You get an exclusive video every month, team emojis, a bunch of other stuff. And as always, guys, have a great night.